I've got a lot of wires here. It's really not all that complicated. I'm going to have a ground wire, then I've got a couple of wires for the high water alarm, and that's just going to operate off of the ground circuit. So one side of that will be connected to ground, the other side will go up to the alarm unit. These 4 wires are going to be for the bilge pump. One is going to be for the positive side of the bilge pump, excuse me, and the other is going to be for the float switch. This bilge pump is also one of those computer controlled bilge pumps with the built-in automatic. What it does is the pump will run every few minutes. I think it's every 2 minutes or something. The pump comes on and runs for a few seconds. If it detects resistance, then it'll stay on. I'm not a big fan of that because I don't like the pump running all the time. It wears down the batteries if you're not on the boat. So I'm just going to put a terminal on that particular wire, but wire tie it off to the side and use it as a backup float switch, and then I'll use a standard rural type, float switch. Alright, let's get to wiring. I'm going to use the heat shrink type connectors, basic ring terminal, and I'll crimp those on there, and then I'll just heat shrink the ends on. Okay, that's one. And we want to cut them to the length so that it makes for a nice, neat installation. So we'll cut these 2 off. Nope, got one of the wrong wires. Be careful about that. Let's push those off to the side for now. Alright. We want those to come off right about there. So we'll clip them off. If I drop that screw, it's going right into the bilge, where I won't be able to get it. Alright, and we will wire tie that one off to the side once we verify that actually is for the float. Alright, we got that done. Time to go do the same thing on the other side. And once we get that done, I'll start running wires through the boat. I'm in the starboard hull, and you can see where I've mounted the bilge pump and the terminal block. I'm going to run my wires along that white hose, which will come across, and you'll see where it comes out on this side. I can follow this up alongside the fuel tank, and coming through here where you can see there's some battery switches right there. So what I'm going to do is come in on the back. I apologize for that. Come in on the back of these battery switches, and there's even a switch for a ground, so I've got a nice heavy ground down here that you can see there. And I'm going to tie my bilge pump into the back of these battery switches so that it cannot accidentally be turned off. I might fix that one bad wire. You see that one, that's kind of that red wire that's haphazardly strung there. Connection's kind of piss poor. I'll probably fix that while I'm at it. I'm also going to have to run a wire across the boat to the other side so that I can hook up the bilge alarm wire. That's going to come through Hopefully we can see this come through here. There's a channel that goes from one hull to the other right through there. And that's where I will run the wire along to the other side for the alarm. I'm going to run two number 12 wires through here. I'm going to run them one at a time because it's a relatively easy shot and I don't want to waste wire by cutting it two chunks off just where I'd have to leave a little bit of extra. So I'm just going to do one at a time. It's a relatively easy run, shouldn't be any problem. I'm using number 12, even though that's a little bit overkill for this size bilge pump, but I just would rather have the less voltage drop from the switch to the pump. And this is such an easy run that I really don't even need any wire snakes or anything like that. I've got this little reset breaker that I'm going to install for the automatic side of the bilge pump. Okay, now it's time to start doing some wires. So what I'm going to have to do is splice that in order to run it to the other side of the boat. Because one of these wires will be for the manual part of the pump and the other wire will be for the alarm. There, we need a bit of red wire. And it just so happens we have a bit of red wire. Alright. Really getting too many wires on this one terminal. Technically, we should not be adding more wires to this. We should go ahead and put a terminal block in for the positive side here. But unfortunately, and as you can see, that poor thing's definitely going to have to be fixed. Slip that under. I'm also going to tighten up this bottom nut because that feels like that's getting loose on the switch. And it most definitely is. Okay. And put that on the very bottom. There. And finally we'll fix this one. That will be much better. Alright. Let's crimp on that. So again, I'm going to come under some of this stuff. I hate the way people always put things over and on top. And see, now I'll be able to tie that down there too. Okay. Tight. We'll secure that off there. That'll be good, that'll clean that up. Okay, the next step is I've got to have to run my wires from one side of the boat to the other. So let's go ahead and do that. There's a channel that runs from one side of the boat to the other side of the boat here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this fish tape and I'm going to send it on through to the other side so I can pick up the wire where we left off. Stand by. It's not going to be that easy. The trick is always figuring out how you can get into these spots. This is a rather large panel and I don't want to take the whole thing out if I can avoid it, so maybe I can pull it out a little bit and get my hand in there. It does feel like that might be the case. So I've got some Velcro there, I think. Get one more screw out. I'll be able to get that open a little bit more. Still doesn't do me a lot of good, does it? Lower panel's not coming out. Well, might have to take the whole thing out. That's a hook. Go. Ah, yes. And here we find we've got a tube going across the boat with a string in it. So as we can see, we got the tube right there, and you can see how it goes back across the boat. So we'll just shove the snake through the tube. I don't think we'll bother with that string. We'll just leave that in place. Bit of a nuisance, they couldn't have run that tube another 6 inches down where I could have reached it without taking this panel off. You'll get the wires straight up into the helm panel from here as well. Check that out. Let's go see if that came out on the other side. Now, of course, I have to take the panel out on this side because they did not run the tube all the way down. It just amazes me that they could not have done that. There we go. And it is possible I can do enough here to get my hand in without taking the panel all the way off. See what we can do with that. Sort of sitting there. And yeah, there's the snake. So if I can just get my hand in there. Ooh. Not sure. No, take it all the way off. Lord almighty. All to save. A few inches of tubing. It's just unbelievable. So easy turned into something so hard because they stopped the tube in that big empty space. I just don't get it. Alright, carry on. I probably don't even need to run the wire through there now that I've got that open. So I'll get the end of the wire. I think I'll start it from down there. Tape that on there. And yes, it's come out on the other side, so we're good to go. Let's put the panel back up. This is where things get interesting. I've got the wires coming out here, and I want to bring one wire up to the electrical panel there and one wire back down to the back of the battery switches here, like on the other side. This part here is a piece of cake. It's a straight drop in there. The tricky part is going to be getting the wires up and through here, which you can see is kind of a tricky run. So I'm going to try to drop the wire snake down from the top and see what happens. Back here behind the electrical panel is the top where I've got to try to snake that wire down through, and as you can see, you can't even really see it. It's all going to be a matter of feel. I'm going to use the same wire snake I used before. I'm hoping this might not be too stiff. I might have to go for a more flexible wire snake, but I'm going to start with this one because I'm too lazy to walk back up to the car and get the other. Before I put this panel back in, I'm going to clean up some of this wiring. It's kind of a little scary that the boat builder left this mess in here with all these wires just hanging. But I guess that's the old out of sight, out of mind. If you don't see it, it's not a problem. But it's only going to take me a couple of minutes. Put a few wire ties on here and clean this up a bit. I don't like the way that one's pulled. It's just simply too tight the way whoever ran that wire. So let's take that off of there, drop that down so that it's not stretched. One thing you don't want to do is stretch wires and put a lot of weight on it. There's just no reason for that at all. That's the kind of thing that'll cause problems. So we'll just let that wire use some more slack from that other side. Alright, now it's time. This is the wire that goes up to the panel for the alarm and for the manual side of the bilge pump. So I'm just going to butt connect these together with these other two wires. Keep it fairly simple. I could put in a terminal block, and that probably would be the better way to go, but I don't actually have an extra terminal block at the moment, and I don't really believe it's all that critical. It's nice if you can do it, but butt connectors here will work well. My thing with butt connectors is I don't have a problem with them if done right, but you also want to leave them where they can be seen. And of course this is an area where we'll be able to see the butt connectors. They're not going to be hidden from view or anything. So I think in this particular instance they'll work just fine. Let's see if I can fit that on there. Yep, perfect. Like all connections, you want to make sure they're nice and tight. And they're not going to slip off. And that's really the key to the whole thing. It's just making sure you get them on there nice and tight. I'll make sure they're okay. And lastly, we want to secure things off. And another thing with butt connectors, or any connectors, crimp connectors for that matter, you want to make sure you take the strain off of them. And wire ties is a great way to secure things up so that you can make sure that all of the strain is off of the wire and off of the connector. And we can already see how much neater that looks than the original. A few wire ties will go a long ways to making for a nice, neat installation. And neat is important because it helps you trace wires down, helps you find faults and problems. It's just so much easier in the end. Do it right. Now that I've got my wires run to the bilge pump terminal, it's time to go ahead and connect them. But before I do that, I'm just going to put some labels on the terminal strips, or nearby the terminal strip, showing what each wire is going to be for. This will make it easier for the owner when it comes time to troubleshooting. Not that anything ever breaks and needs troubleshooting, but we do know occasionally it does. So having labels on your wires will just make life so much easier. Alright, there's our labels, so it's time to start putting wires together. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and put the terminals on and hook them up before I tie them down to the tube running back. This just makes it easier for me. And I stripped the ends of these wires so that I would know that these are for the manual and alarm. And of course, them being color coded, because the alarm is contacting on the ground side or negative side of the terminal. I can go ahead and use the yellow wire on this. Alright, let's heat shrink those before we put them on. We'll take care of that. Next step will be to screw them down here. That's going to be an alarm. Alright, now that we got them in there, it's time to work the wires backwards, securing them down. So I'm going to tie this all into one bundle here. Need a longer wire tie. I always need something else. These will work. I am bound and determined to throw something into this bilge. Alright, and I know some of you are going to say, yeah, but you can't see the labels now. And you're right, you can't see the labels, but these aren't something you're going to have to look at every single day. The labels are really only there when you're working on it, and you can just slide the hose out of the way to be able to see that, so I'm not too worried about that. And now I'm going to go up and test the alarm and manual side of this, because those are wired up on the main panel already. Oops, no they're not. Never mind. Now I've got my wire temporarily hooked up there just so that I can test the alarm, make sure it works on this end. And still nothing. Mystery, mystery. Alright, let's try this one last time. They say the third time is the charm. There we go. Helps if you hook up both wires. Okay, the last step we gotta do down here is go ahead and put some of this goop, this liquid tape, on our connections just to keep them nice. Lastly, I've got to connect the wiring behind the electrical panel for the alarm circuit. This should only take a few minutes. Alright, there we go. Nice and neat. Let's check that real quick. Here I'm running on both sides. One more check of the float, just to verify. Okay, that completes another project. We've installed a bilge pump in each hull. We've installed an automatic float switch for that bilge pump. We've installed a float switch for a high water alarm and the high water alarm buzzer at the helm. We've wired the automatic float switches and the high water alarm up to a non-switched power source. This way you can't accidentally turn off the power on either one of these. They're always going to be on. Each of those power supplies has their own fuse to protect them and the circuit. The owner can now sleep a little bit better knowing that his boat's well protected from minor leaks. Also, with the high water alarm, if anything should happen in the middle of the night, hopefully somebody on the dock will hear it and be able to call you. Alright, now that this project's done, it's time to move on to the next.